Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. This is Dr. Nicole, and welcome to this video where we're going to talk about mastering healthy, balanced boundaries in your relationship. All right, tell me this, ladies. I'm especially talking to women. Have you ever felt resentful in your relationship? Are you feeling unappreciated or unheard or unseen? These are all experiences that can be quite common, but they are usually a sign that the boundaries in your relationship are somehow out of balance, right? And I like to talk about healthy and balanced boundaries because boundaries are not an extreme thing one way or the other, either too rigid or too loose, right? So those experiences or those feelings are usually a sign that there's something in the boundaries in your relationship that are out of balance. Okay, so let's talk about it, right? So we've been hearing a lot about boundaries. They are key to being able to experience a healthy partnership, a fulfilling relationship. They help facilitate so much in terms of respect and trust and all of those things that I just mentioned, feeling heard, feeling seen, feeling like you matter, right? So this is no sort of small thing in terms of looking at the boundaries in your relationship. They are really a key foundation. And especially for women, we want to always talk about balancing out the boundaries and the feminine energy. They go together. They're like a yin and a yang, like they fit together. And it's important to really have both, right? So I want you to think about four things, or I'm going to touch on four things that will help you to get more balance in terms of healthy boundaries in your relationship. One is that you have to learn not to hide behind boundaries. And I'll go into that. One is you don't hide behind boundaries. Don't use boundaries as an excuse to shut down, cut people off, not engage, right? Two is really learning to communicate your needs in that two-way street of communication where it's a dance, it's an active engagement, but it's also receiving and listening. Three is learning to prioritize self care and take care of yourself. You will not have healthy boundaries if you don't really look at prioritizing your self care. And four, finally, is not running away from red flags, not ignoring red flags that are happening in your relationship, not avoiding them, not running into them. So those are the four things that are key to healthy boundaries in your relationship. So I'm sure if you all watching this, if you sit back and think, you can probably bring up a scenario where you felt like your boundaries weren't respected, either in your relationship or in other situations, in any other relationship or interaction with people. And just think about how that made you feel. It probably made you doubt yourself or question yourself or wonder what you did wrong, or maybe it made you feel angry or feel like, this is a pattern that keeps happening and you're questioning yourself, right? It could bring up feelings that trigger feelings from when we were younger, where we felt like we weren't respected or heard. So, this experience of not having our boundaries, feeling like our boundaries aren't respected, that should be a signal for us to really take action or to do something to shift that reality. So, working on your boundaries is one of the healthiest things that you can do for yourself as well as your relationships. Now, I know the word no is associated a lot with boundaries, and it is a key part because people who are always wanting to please others, always wanting to say yes, always wanting to make sure they don't disappoint other people, they tend to have a hard time saying no. But in our relationships, in our committed relationships, in our marriages, in our intimate relationships, it's not only about saying no. It goes beyond that, right? So the first thing that I mentioned is you want to make sure you're not hiding behind boundaries. While saying no is a part of healthy boundaries, it's not the end all and be all. And sometimes we can get so used to not having boundaries that when we start to have them, we go to the extreme and we use them as barriers. Instead of boundaries, they're really walls that we put up between us and other people because maybe it's painful to communicate, or it's hard to say what we want, or we feel like it's no use. There's all kind of stories we might be telling ourselves as far as why it seems easier to just put up these walls and barriers. So the first thing you want to understand is that boundaries, it doesn't mean you're completely shutting people off. It's actually a way to help you lean in more and engage and communicate and be with that person more, because you've established in a way what the ground rules are or what the expectations are. So I want you to remember that. Number one, do not hide behind boundaries. Do not hide behind saying no and avoiding difficult conversations and avoiding expressing yourself under the name of, oh, I'm setting boundaries, right? And think about it for yourself. Has that happened to you? Or has that been something, is that a way that you have been in relationships? And if you have, what did it really get you, right? A lot of times it just gets us shutting people out, cutting people off, and protecting ourselves. It's a self protection, but it's not necessarily healthy. Okay. So we're not hiding behind boundaries. We're understanding the difference between boundaries and walls or barriers. And we're not going to use walls and barriers as the way that we establish healthy boundaries. Okay. Number two is you want to learn to communicate. Communication is one of those words that we hear all the time. That's because it is vital, right? But it's not just communication as far as I'm going to tell you what I say or, what I feel. Communication is a dance. It's a back and forth. And it's also not just words. Communication is in actions. It's in gestures, expressions, tone of voice. It's so many things besides just the words that you're speaking. But if we're talking about boundaries, it is important to say certain things and to be able to listen. One of the things that is important to say is to talk about expectations. So just bringing up the topic is important. Hey, what are your expectations around X, Y, and Z? What is important to you with one, two, and three, right? And it could be around things around what each of you are going to do. What are the roles? Even expectations around gender roles, expectations around dealing with family, dealing with difficult situations, how you're going to, how you each view conflict. So it's really bringing out into the open things that are going to come up in the relationship and being able to talk about expectations. And that's where you find out where the gaps are. So when you learn to communicate those things, it's an opportunity to get on the same page, or at least to know what page you're on. Some of us go into relationships and situations with unspoken expectations. So we never even know that we're on the different page, or we're in a different book, or one person's in a movie, somebody else is in a TV show, right? Because we're never giving ourselves to put those, a chance to put those things out and reveal them, so we can see where we differ and if there's an opportunity to find common ground, or if the places and subjects or topics, issues that we disagree on, is it okay? Sometimes it's okay to agree to disagree. We don't have to be in sync and of the same mind 100% of the time. Sometimes it's core values and core uh, things that you want to discuss, and then other things it's not that big of a deal. The other thing about communication is you have to learn that it's a give take. As much as you want to be heard, you have to be willing to hear the other. And sometimes in hearing the other, hearing your partner, your spouse, you might hear some uncomfortable quote unquote truths. You might hear observations about yourself that you didn't expect to hear. A lot of times we will go into communications or discussions with the idea that we're the only ones that have an issue with the way that our partner is being, right? but we don't know, they might have issues with us too. Or it might just be because they're outside of you, they observe things about you that you can't see about yourself. And that's one of the powerful things about being in a relationship, the growth that comes from being emotionally open and intimate, and vulnerable with another person, to where they can see things about you that you can't see about yourself. So part of that communication is that they might share some of those things with you. And you have to be willing and open to listening and to sort of respecting their need to express things too, that it's not just you. I can tell you personally, this has happened with me many times where I don't necessarily see things about myself. We all have blind spots. And so being willing to be open and hear what your partner has to say and actively listen. That means not just hearing, but actively listening to understand and respecting their right to feel what they feel, validating their feelings. And when you do that, that you model what you want your partner to do for you, right? That you want them to hear you, to see you, to validate that you're feeling a certain way. Validate doesn't mean you all have to agree, but it means you accept that their experience is their experience and they have a right to it. Okay? So it's that two-way street that is really, really important, and respecting their boundaries. The best way to get what you want is the golden rule: do unto others as you want them to do unto you. So if you want your boundaries respected, you have to respect theirs. And one of the best ways to respect your partner's boundaries in a relationship is to pay attention to the small things, the details. I know a lot of times we think relationships are made or broken on these big things, but a lot of times it's that saying, death by a thousand cuts, right? We can build up a relationship with small daily habits that accumulate positive feelings and positive actions and appreciation, and we can break them down with a thousand small things over and over, such as disregarding. You know, couples might fight over picking up stuff off the floor, or who's going to put the laundry in the laundry basket, or who's going to pick stuff up. One might care more, might be more of a neat freak than the other. You have to be willing to look at the details. And if your partner says that these things, even though they seem small to you, they matter to me, they bother me, or I want more of this. You have to really be willing to respect their boundaries in that way. And that is going to give you, that's going to lay the groundwork for you to say, I need that from you as well. So it's that active listening, and that's respecting their boundaries as well. I want you to also think about what not to do, right? The famous relationship researcher and therapist John Gottman. And by the way, I'm trained in the Gottman uh, therapy approach. Is that there are four types of communication that you absolutely want to avoid. And these four types are actually very predictive of divorce. I think upwards like over 80%. If you engage in these four types, you need to stop it now. One is contempt, showing contempt for your partner. Contempt is different from disagreement. It's like it's you as a person, and it's a dislike, right? And so the other person can feel that energy, and it's very distancing. So contempt is something you want to avoid and change. The other is criticism, criticizing that person, always having something negative. It's not sharing how you feel. It's not using I statements to share how you feel about something that's going on with you all. It's criticizing that person in a way that belittles them and makes them, that can make them not feel good. The other is defensiveness. That's where you're never able to take in any thoughts or feedback or anything, observations that your partner is sharing with you. It might be real concerns, but instead of taking it in, you're defensive. You're shutting them down. You're giving the message that you are not willing to listen and understand, and you're taking it personal, and you're being defensive against it. That is very off putting, right? Think about it. If you've ever tried to share something with someone with good intention and they're just shutting it down, it makes you shut down as well. And then finally is stonewalling. That's different than taking a pause. A lot of times in conflict, there's some people that can't be engaged. They get overstimulated. They need to pull back. They need time. They need space. Stonewalling is a very passive aggressive. It's being aggressive in a passive way. It's a passive aggressive form of communication that says, I am going to completely shut you down. I'm going to ignore you. I'm not going to engage with you. And for the recipient, the person who is being stonewalled, this can be very, very hurtful and painful. They can feel powerless. They can feel unheard. All of those things I said in the beginning, right? It can build up resentment. So, stonewalling has got to be one of the most uh, dangerous things for a relationship. So if you find yourself being in a situation where when you get upset, the way you want to express it is to shut your partner out, completely ignore them, not engage with them, you need to find other ways to communicate because that is very, very um, dangerous, detrimental to your relationship. Okay. So within the communication, I talked about things to do, and those are four things you absolutely want to stop doing if you're doing them or avoid them. All right. And also, boundaries in communication, boundaries are not ultimatums. They're not saying you must do this. You're saying boundaries are saying this is what matters to me. This is what's important to me. These are the limits of what I'm willing to accept or not. But it's not you better do this, you must do that. Boundaries need to be expressed in I statements. I This is what's important to me. This is what I am not comfortable with. Okay? This is what I need from you, right? It's not you better do this, okay? That's when we get into putting up walls and barriers and shutting people out. And it's usually a sign that we don't have the skills to really communicate our needs. We're just putting it all on the other person. All right. So the other thing is this number three is it is really important to take care of yourself. Please, please, please do not dismiss. I know self care is something we hear so much about. That's because, like communication, it is key. And so when you're in a place where you're completely empty, you don't know any way to nurture yourself or to practice like replenish, pour back into yourself. Very simply put, if you are a cup and you're not being poured back into, you're not pouring back into yourself, there's no way that you can fully and like be there, be present with your partner or with anybody else. So you have to be able to take time out to do what is going to help you to feel good, to function better, to learn to express yourself. It could simply be more rest or making sure you get out and exercise and move your body because that is good for your overall well being. It gets your blood flowing, it helps your brain, it clears your mind, right? It could be journaling, it could be taking yourself and treating yourself to something. I just went and got, before videoing this, I just went and got a nice chocolate croissant and a cup of tea because I felt like it's a cold day and I want this for myself. It could be something big or small, going to get a massage, going out with friends, spending some quality time with your partner to help you reconnect. That could even be a form of self care. And then that could give you the energy or the motivation to then open up and talk with your partner and be more vulnerable and share, right? But the key is learning that you cannot be everything to everyone. You cannot be empty and then think you're going to pour into someone else. And you cannot think that other people are going to do for you what you're unwilling to do for yourself. Let me say that again. You cannot believe that other people are going to do for you what you're not willing to do for yourself. So when you don't practice self care, you're teaching the people around you that you don't value yourself and your needs. So why would we really expect them to value that more than we value it ourselves? Okay. So self care is a form of teaching people how to treat you as well as you treating yourself. And then the fourth and final thing to think about when the establishing balanced, healthy boundaries with your partner in your relationship is to not ignore red flags. Be willing to discuss things that come up that you notice, that you observe. And if you're being treated, if there's a pattern of you repeatedly being treated a certain way, you don't always have to brush that under the rug or swallow it and say it's not that big of a deal. There's a time for compromise, and there's a time for discussion and collaboration, and really uh, feeling like it's okay to speak up for what's important to you, right? A red flag is when you are perpetually or you're constantly being ignored, or something that you say is important to you is constantly being dismissed, or the other person is constantly showing that they only care about themselves and how they feel and how things affect them. And so the importance of recognizing red flags is not to say there's a red flag, I'm out of here, but it could be a sign. They're usually signs that that things need to be discussed and brought into the open. All right. And that's a whole other video, which is how to have these difficult conversations so that um, you're you're not sweeping things under the rug. You're not blowing up. We don't want to do that. But we also don't want to keep saying, oh, it's not a big deal. Oh, it's not a big deal. And then what happens? We end up feeling resentful. Okay. So I want you to remember that it's really about communicating openly, listening empathically. So listening with your empathetic self, and prioritizing self care and your growth so that you can show up as your best self in your relationship. And that is how you master balanced, healthy boundaries in your relationships. Okay, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like and share this video, and also hit the notifications bell because I'm going live more often and you don't want to miss any content. All right, take care. It's Dr. Nicole.